Just ahead on American Black Journal, Police Chief James Craig joins me for a frank conversation about public safety in Detroit. We'll talk about the changes taking place now that the city has emerged from bankruptcy. Plus, we'll get the chief's views on racial profiling and the relationship between the police and the community. There's a lot to talk about, so stay right here.
At DTE Energy, we believe that we have a greater responsibility. We believe that being part of a community means being involved in the fabric of that community, investing time, effort, and resources in the communities we serve. DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of American Black Journal.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. Now that Detroit's financial emergency has ended, a $1.7 billion reinvestment plan is underway to help the city meet its obligations to residents. Public safety is one of the basic services that'll get much needed resources and improvements. That change is already underway. The governor says the city's homicide rate has fallen 18% since the bankruptcy process began. The closure rate for homicide cases has gone from 11% to 72%, and police response time has fallen from an average of 58 minutes to less than 18. Here to talk more about public safety in Detroit is Police Chief James Craig. Welcome back to American Black Journal.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I think this is the second time we've had you on the show. The
Yes.
first time you were brand new to the job.
I was new.
Yeah.
Probably a month into my tenure.
Right. So now we're
18 months, 17 months later.
Okay. Those numbers that I was just referencing, I'm not sure Detroiters are aware of those kind of changes. I want to say when I go on Facebook and talk to the other folks I know who live in Detroit, they're still under the impression that things are either getting worse or staying the same.
Wow, that's interesting because, you know, my impressions, because I'm out in the community, I'm in community meetings, and people are daily thanking me,
telling you,
and saying, we appreciate what's being done. We know that crime is going down. And it's nice that I can talk about these great statistics. I think one that's notable, you know, we set a very modest goal at the beginning of 2014. After coming on a end of success in 2013,
right.
We set a very modest goal of 10% overall reduction to Part 1 crime, which includes violent and property. But we've exceeded that. And now we're sitting at last quarter of the year, almost, 3 short weeks away.
Right.
We're looking at 20% reduction. But I also know it's just not crime stats that define success. It really, what defines success in my view, in the world that I've come from, is what do people think?
How do people feel, right?
And how do they feel? Do you feel safer? And that's the conversation that I hear often, not sometimes.
Right.
I mean, people will approach me in restaurants, they'll approach me in a mall, and say, Chief, we see the difference. We appreciate what you're doing. We see more police officers. In fact, I have fewer police officers than I had when I started.
Right.
But they see more police officers.
But they're in more active roles. They're out in the community.
They're out engaging. There's relationships. And so I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
And so, and I know that it's continued work in progress in educating, you know, the city that, yes, we're down in crime.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that the work is over.
Right.
Because there's still plenty to do.
Yeah. The two numbers that, to me, I think are the most striking are that closure rate on homicides. That has been haunting us
throughout the year.
Forever.
Well, as you pointed out, 11%. And now we hover anywhere between 65 and 70%. But I will tell you, the best indicator of a great relationship with the community, you know, Detroit's always been lauded as a place that, of this no snitching culture.
Right, sure.
Well, it's no secret that we solve many of our crimes when people talk to us.
When people help you out with what
Absolutely. They know. And now that people have confidence, that they view the police department as credible, they talk, and our clearance rates. And that's not to take away from the great work of our detectives.
Right. But you feel like that community participation is one of the sort of key movers in that number.
Key factor.
Yeah. The other number that I think every resident is real focused on is that response time.
Oh,
right?
my goodness.
You pick up the phone and dial 911.
And we will come. And we prioritize what's important, of course. You know, those crimes in progress, like shootings in progress,
Right.
robberies, burglaries. Those type of calls certainly take on a priority status.
Sure.
But as I've reported out publicly in the media, is that Detroit had what they call a category called Can 04.
Right.
And Can 04 was simply calls that weren't addressed or handled, that were sitting someplace.
Right.
4 o'clock in the morning, they were placed in a can.
Yeah.
And they were doled out, and they were handled when they could handle it. And so the conversation with the community, with me coming in before I got here, was, you know, you call 911 and no one shows up.
No one shows up for these things that are not the most serious crimes, but they are crimes.
Exactly.
And
so that's changed.
So how are you dealing with those calls? You don't have more officers.
Don't have more officers. You know, oftentimes I say one thing: cops count, leadership matters, and they both work together. And certainly, I'm passionate and commitment to service. Service is critical. Police officers know that. I meet with them. I put tremendous value in their work.
Sure.
Certainly the leadership team, we had to go through a number of changes. I'm very comfortable with the leadership team that's in place now. We now have neighborhood police officers who are directly connected to the neighborhoods. And I think that strategy alone, we don't have the luxury of like what was going on in the 70s and 80s, where police officers working foot beats out of mini stations.
Out of the mini stations, right.
I mean, great strategy, great engagement, but we don't have the staff.
You don't have the capacity to do that anymore.
Not at all. But neighborhood police officers certainly fill that void, and the feedback I'm getting from both the neighborhood police officers and community residents, they like the program.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when you were on before, we talked about the number of officers who were doing, I don't know what you would call it, patrol, direct police work,
right.
Versus officers who were doing administrative or clerical jobs. That's a long-standing issue also in Detroit.
Yes.
It seems like you've been able to get your arms around it a little better than some of your predecessors.
Yeah, and we have, and we're still, you know, certainly moving in that direction. Certainly with the mayor's committed to the same issue.
Yeah.
He's really, his leadership in forging forward and making sure that our police officers are doing police work and that they're not tied up in an administrative capacity.
Right.
And so we've worked on some initiatives to continue that process of civilianization.
Right, right. One thing I've noticed that I wanted to talk to you about is there seems to be an increase in traffic stops. And I know that because I get stopped now on Jefferson for traffic violations,
Yes.
and not just on Jefferson. I see it throughout the city. Now, a lot of people think that's nuisance, that's a distraction, but I've talked to enough officers to know that is a way of preventing more serious crimes, that when you pull somebody over and you run their name, if they have warrants, now you've got somebody off the street who probably shouldn't have been there in the first place. If you find something in the car when you pull somebody over, that's crime interdiction. It's not just about tickets.
It's not just about tickets, and as it was reported recently, certainly I don't engage in the illegal activity, as it was pointed out, on
right.
quotas.
This idea of quotas,
Oh,
right?
absolutely not. There's no room for that. But, you know, I am big on saving lives, and, you know, we got to talk about traffic fatalities and the number of people we lose. So it's an educational opportunity for our community. And one of the things I heard, and many of our neighbors in the suburbs know, they might drive a certain way in their home communities.
Right.
They say, well, I'm in Detroit. I had an occasion one morning to stop someone at 5:30 in the morning who just blatantly disregarded a red
light. I see that all the time.
And I stopped him. We had a conversation. He was not a resident of Detroit.
Yeah.
And he said, truthfully, if I was in Grosse Pointe, I wouldn't have run this light.
Yeah.
And I said, we shouldn't run it in Detroit. And so the message is getting out there. People recognize that Detroit police officers are out visible. They are taking enforcement action, and so
Yeah.
that's the new Detroit Police Department.
Yeah. You know, coming out of the bankruptcy, police took less of a hit than other things in the city. But one of the things that did change was the pension program, that they are not going to get the same pension that they had before. And it makes me wonder, you know, the pay is lower than it should be, and certainly lower than it is in other communities. It's more dangerous work than you have in other communities. And now there isn't that incentive of the pension. So who are the people we're able to attract for that job? How are you going out and telling people you should be a police officer in the city of Detroit?
Well, you know, that's an interesting statement, and it's a challenge. Certainly, what attracts young people to become Detroit police officers? The excitement, certainly, and this is why I put a premium on leadership. People want to work here. When I meet with new hires, new recruit classes, they come from all over. They want to be Detroit police officers. And I think, you know, if a young person is drawn to public service, particularly in law enforcement, they want to go somewhere where they feel like they can make a difference.
Right.
And coming to Detroit, that's what we offer. But not just that, we offer diversity of assignment. You know, a lot of small agencies, you know, you have patrol, investigations, but it's restricted. I mean, you can work in a position for years with very little movement and certainly very little challenge and not as much opportunity of promotion. In large agencies, it's different. And so we use that as a recruiting tool.
As a recruiting tool, okay.
And certainly, you're spot on when you talk about the challenges that Detroit police officers face. And then you look at the pay comparison to just other agencies local. So certainly the challenge we have is keeping away the recruiters from the South, like Atlanta and Houston, Texas, my old home of Los Angeles, who want to hire former Detroit police officers.
Well, that's the other side of this. I mean, the training that you get and the experience that you get in Detroit is valuable in other communities where you could go and make more money and maybe deal with less danger.
It happened for me. And while I was forced out because of a layoff, you know, I opted to go to Los Angeles, certainly made more money, very different environment, certainly the support that police officers get in Los Angeles is very different. You know, it's no secret that, you know, pre-bankrupt, different administration, there was very little investment in policing. And,
well,
you
there
know,
wasn't money for it.
But sometimes it's the little things. I mean, is it right that police officers, their mobile office, the police vehicle, they're driving around, it has is dilapidated, paint's peeling in the Motor City. Something's wrong with that picture. And when people visit a city, the first identity of that local city government's the police.
Often a cop car,
in the Motor City. And so that was problematic. That was the first thing that certainly jumped out to me, returning home after so many years. It shouldn't look this way. So certainly, you know, the 100 donated vehicles certainly was a great help. It certainly does a lot for morale. And so again, now folks see the importance of investment. And you know, I saw it in Cincinnati, in those neighborhoods that were unsafe and there was no police, very little engagement. Business owners or potential but didn't want to invest. But certainly when you want to talk about an economic upshift, it can only happen when a city is safe or becoming safer.
When people feel like it's safe.
Absolutely.
That perception matters.
And when you look at downtown now, I can count off to you the fireworks. I can talk about the largest free jazz festival, opening day for the Tigers, just the myriad events that occur here, the number of people, our officers say they've seen so many more people in Detroit. The city's back.
Certainly in that way. I mean, it's all very different. Do you feel like, though, that some of this reinvestment that we're gonna see over the next 5 to 10 years, both from the city and state, we've got to put some of that into police salary, right? I mean, we're not paying Detroit police enough.
I would agree we're not paying them enough. And I know not speaking for the mayor, but I know the mayor feels the same way. Certainly he was able to creatively find a way to give the officers back some of their money.
Right.
He gets it, he understands it, I get it, it's important, and if we're really going to focus on moving forward and creating a safe city,
right.
you know, this idea of Detroit becoming one of the safest major cities in America can only happen with cops.
With officers, right.
And it only happens when you have an engaged community, a community that says, I have confidence in this police department.
Right.
And the investment is important. And as people continue to move back into the city,
yeah,
that's an indicator. You know, taxes increase, there's an opportunity to pay police officers more. You name a city.
Yeah.
That works.
Right, right. I want to talk about the relationship between the police department and the community. I know that's a prime concern of yours. I also, of course, talk lots with people like Ron Scott, someone I have a lot of respect for, who's worked real hard from the community side to improve relations. I still hear complaints about that relationship. I still hear that Detroit police are maybe too aggressive.
Are you hearing that from lots of people or one person?
Well, I mean
seriously.
Well, and that's a great question. I mean, how do you respond to that charge?
Well, what I respond to is say, I push back on it vigorously. And the reason why I do is because in my now 18 months here, I've seen a different narrative. And I'm not being protective because I'm now in the position of leadership over the Detroit Police Department. I'm suggesting that, again, as we talked earlier about people stopping me, saying what they think about the police department,
Sure.
our neighborhood police officers, the fact that the Detroit Police Department successfully completed on my watch during the time that we had an emergency manager and a new mayor, we're out of consent judgment.
The consent decree is over. That's right. You've met
And
the
so
terms of that.
one of the longest running
Yes.
consent decrees. And so, but here's something that for me that's a real key gauge. The folks will tell you, well, no, is the Detroit Police Department engaging in excessive force? Well, and I've had this conversation with Mr. Scott. I said, you know, certainly I, invited him to sit on my community advisory board. He wants nothing to do with that, candidly. I also said if there's some, you know, allegations of corruption, allegations of excessive force, please bring them to me, hold me accountable. We'll make sure there's a very transparent investigation.
Right.
I have not had that conversation. But more importantly, so let's take our monthly operations. We've done 13.
Right.
You know, where we go into a neighborhood.
You go into an area
with
and
200 to 300 police officers.
Right. Yeah.
200 to 300 police officers. Let me tell you the optics of it. You've seen it on the news.
Sure.
People are clapping.
Yeah.
People who live in the
no
neighborhood
question.
cheering. Even those in handcuffs.
Yeah. Sometimes
they're saying thank you, Chief.
Yeah.
I've seen images of people coming out of their front door. One lady in particular who falls to her knees and said, "Thank God the police are here." I will tell you.
You feel like that's the...
Well, that's a key gauge,
Yeah.
but let me just say this. So 300 officers, 200 to 300 officers in a neighborhood.
Right.
In an enforcement posture. Okay?
Right.
Here's the different narrative. 13 events like that. 1 reportable use of force incident. I didn't say excessive force. There was 1 use of force incident.
Out of the 13.
Out of the 13 with these large number of officers, and
Right.
sometimes we had the Michigan State Police that joined us
Sure.
in many of these operations. My point is this. I was in Los Angeles for 28 years. I've been part of large-scale operations going into neighborhoods.
Yeah.
That was not the reception we received.
Sure.
We're not talking about people clapping and cheering.
Yeah.
Conversely, so I say to that, if people didn't like, didn't respect, and felt that this organization was brutal,
Right.
engaging in allegations of excessive force, why do we get that reception? And why the relationships we have in our neighborhoods, the the response is very different. And so
Right.
when you share with me the conversation you've had, and I understand the conversation with Mr. Scott, but
And is it just about a disconnect between is there still a disconnect between the department and certain elements of the community, I guess is the question.
Well, I would be foolish to think that's the reception we get across the city.
Right.
I mean, I go on radio, we talk to youth groups, we have youth-based programs, and I've asked, I said, if there's a segment of our community that feels that way, I welcome an opportunity to sit down, work with them,
to talk to them,
to bridge
about
that
it,
gap. I'm certainly for that. I've done it successfully and been part of it successfully in other cities.
Yeah.
And certainly, again, the thing that's very different about Detroit, when you look at, okay, here's another stat that kind of tells the story.
Yeah.
So when you look at our use of force incidents compared to the year prior and the year before that, we have a double-digit reduction in use of force incidents.
So you feel like that's going in the right direction?
Well, I mean,
becoming
reduction.
less frequent.
Officer-involved shooting incidents.
Right.
We're down, I want to say, I'm using my memory, 10%. We're down in use of force incidents, probably 14, 15%. And so allegations of excessive force down.
Yeah.
These are statistics. We pay attention to that. I mean, just like what the Baltimore Police Commissioner reported, he has seen a decline, and I know his decline is based on community engagement.
Community engagement,
and
sure.
we see the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a police department, when you look at force, the tragic situation on last weekend where the officer was attacked by a woman suffering from mental illness who was sliced with a razor. The officers would have been proper in using deadly force.
But they
it did not happen.
Yeah, you know, I want to. We've got about 4 minutes left. I want to ask you about that sort of deadly use of force, which is, of course, in the news. You had a lot of people, especially African Americans, really starting to fear the value that's placed on our lives by officers. What, as an African American leading a major city police department, how do you sort of answer that? How do you speak to this anger, justified anger that people really have about these incidents in other places? And of course, we don't. That's not Detroit.
Right, and that's the distinction we must make. And so I've been public about making that distinction because we're not a Ferguson, for starters.
Right, a lot of differences between there and here.
And I welcome the anger. I welcome it. For me, I look at it as an opportunity. But also in this narrative about police excessive use of force, whether it's racial profiling, let's have candid conversations. But let's not forget, you're right, Black lives matter, but also all lives matter.
Right.
And when we look at the 200 and now 85 homicides in the city of Detroit, did anyone march? Now, one person confronted me and said, well, that's divisive. No, it's not divisive. For example, the little 9-year-old girl who was hit by gunfire, who's recovering from her injuries, what about her?
Right.
What about our police officers who go out, whether they live in the city or not, they go out and committed and dedicated, the vast majority, go out and put their lives on the line each and every day to do what? To protect us.
To protect us, right. African Americans in this city.
African Americans, we're 85%.
Right.
And so I think it's unfair if we just put, police officers in a category, white police officer shoots Black suspect, that's a racist cop, racist police department. That's not the case. Not in every police agency.
Right, right. And
and that's, when I talk about expanding the narrative, let's talk openly, let's engage, let's dispel some of the perceptions that are out there. And I'm not in any way suggesting that we shouldn't address it. Right. I'm about the business of transparency, and I'm also welcoming, oversight.
Right.
In fact, Detroit was under federal oversight for 11 years. I was in LAPD when we had a federal monitor for 8 years. The city of Cincinnati, likewise. I've had the good fortune of working in different places that really have exposed me, and I think the real key is the conversation.
Right.
And not just conversation, but Yeah, having a relationship, building trust. And this is why when you see places like a Ferguson, and you say, well, what's different about Ferguson in Detroit? Well, let's talk about 1967 Detroit.
Sure, right.
Or let's even talk about when I joined the department in 1977. The police department then as compared to now.
Right. You feel like there's enough distance.
I don't feel it. I know that this is not the same police department. I know that we have police officers that care, all races, whether black, white,
right.
brown, male, female, who are committed. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have issues.
Right.
But the key for a police chief and the police department is that when those issues arise, when there's an issue of excessive force, that we address it. If there's an issue of corruption, that we address it. And we're doing that.
Mean it. Yeah.
You've read the recent reports of some things that we're rooting out in terms of corrupt activity. Sure. We will never shy away from that.
Yeah. Okay, Chief. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
We'll have you back, I'm sure.
I look forward to it.
Keep updating on the process. Things seem like they're moving in the right direction.
They are moving, and I'm just excited about the future, and it's going to continue to get better.
Okay. That's our program for today. Thanks for watching. You can get more information about our guests at AmericanBlackJournal.org. And as always, you can connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. Plus, you can now hear episodes of American Black Journal on WDET 1019 FM. We'll see you next time.
At DTE Energy, we believe that we have a greater responsibility. We believe that being part of a community means being involved in the fabric of that community, investing time, effort, and resources in the communities we serve. DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of American Black Journal.